Welcome everyone to another installment of the Intentional Success webinar series. Today, we're going to talk about intentional success as a strategy. And in fact, intentional success has been my mantra and my strategy for a number of years. And I'll share that with you. I'll help you understand some of the thinking behind it and how we actually apply it in business on a daily basis. For those of you who don't know me, I am Tom Stimson. I am the Stimson Group. We have a small team here of marketing and admin folks. It's mostly me. And I work with owners and management teams that are trying to ask better questions, make better decisions, and get where they're going a lot faster. And right now we're having a lot of fun with my clients as we deal with all the things that are going on as we get to what I hope will soon be the end of this pandemic. But as I will talk about in the webinar, that's really not the important milestone. So if you're new to this, yes, we are recording, and it's usually about at this point that I check to make sure that I am indeed recording, and we are. Questions, please use the Q&A box to post questions so that I can give them a good read. If you make comments or ask questions in chat, I may not see them because it's awkward sometimes to scroll up and down, but I do try and keep track of what's going on. By all means, introduce yourself to everyone in the chat. Say hello to them. There's some great people there you need to network with. A lot of regulars there. Hi, Anthony. And if you've got questions for them, don't hesitate to post in there and you guys all connect. That's the whole point of networking, isn't it? So let's do a little bit of online networking. Now, honest conversations are where I always start when we go from networking into actually sitting down together. And if you want an honest conversation with me, just scan the QR code and make an appointment. And let's learn about what's keeping your business from moving forward, or maybe we need to slow it down and better understand your obstacles to success. If there's a way for us to work together and both of us be happy and productive and successful in doing it, then we should talk about that. And if not, well, then we've just met another friend in the industry, and there's nothing wrong with that book, either. So my quote for this week, since we were talking about intentionality, is John Maxwell, one of the most intentional business writers we have, is that an unintentional life accepts everything and does nothing. An intentional life embraces only the things that will add to the mission of significance. And this is important for me in a lot of ways, because intentional success answers the question, well, what are you going to do about it? And as a person who hears a lot of complaints and a lot of posturing about this isn't right, or why are we dealing with this, doing something about it is all that really matters. So yeah, we do have to identify what the issue is so we know what to do about it. But we also actually have to have a goal that we are intentionally making steps towards that goal. And that is one of the keys to intentional success, is actually clearly understanding your goal, which is why we're having this webinar. Now, almost 2 years of this pandemic that we've been going through, you've been the fly. Now it's time to start being the windshield. And if you read my blog posts every week, you've noticed that we've really turned the corner on advice, and we've moved very much out of, that survive and revive mode, and that we're really focusing on thriving now. How do we take advantage of the gift that the pandemic has given our industry and being able to restart and do things differently? And there's nothing more exciting than a do-over, and we've been in a fantastic do-over. Not everybody's benefiting from it, maybe not in the same ways or to the same extent. So there's still a lot of work to do, and I will continue to do what I can to help you. But if you can't do it on your own, reach out. This is what I do. So you've been the fly. Let's try and be the windshield for a little bit. You have to control your course and trajectory. You're driving down the road, the wind is blowing like it is outside here today. You got to hold on to the steering wheel. You've got to make adjustments. You're never going to keep a perfectly straight line, but we have to keep going. We drive intentionally. If you don't, you smack into stuff. So we can think about our businesses in much the same way. Quantitative goals are not the solution right now. Qualitative goals and targets are. So we'll talk a lot about qualitative things. Next month, I want to talk about some quantitative stuff. And then the obstacles that we're encountering are just part of the win. That's part of what's buffeting our trip. And they're not going to stop us. They're just going to cause us to make those adjustments. And we need to recognize them, but it doesn't change the fact that we're going to continue to make the choices that get us farther on down that road. So before we get too far into this, I do have to, talk a little bit. I'm not doing the pandemic business updates anymore, but I do need to talk a little bit about the elephant in the room, which is indeed the pandemic, which has brought all of us together, much closer together. Now, in medical terms, we're still in a pandemic. At least we believe we are. We won't know until we're out of it. It's like a recession. You don't know that the recession has started until you're, 6 months down the road in it. We're still in a pandemic, but are we in a pandemic in business terms? And that's a big question. One of the first things I ask my new prospects, what are you still thinking? Are you still in crisis mode? Because by now you shouldn't be. And even if you do believe we are in a pandemic and still continue to be in a pandemic, the question is, why would we even think about waiting for the pandemic to be over to do the next step? The pandemic is not controlling our lives. It's changing what our choices and some of our options are. It's creating influencers out there that are guiding us, back and forth down the path, but we can still continue to go straight down that path. Waiting for it to end is not going to change anything or do anything positive for you or your business. So how long are we going to let that state of pandemic define our businesses? And I'm encouraging all of you to get past that. That is no longer what the goal is or what the outcome is to get past the pandemic. My point is that strategy does not wait for milestones such as the end of a pandemic. It anticipates them. So knowing that the pandemic will end and whatever changes that might bring to our business, we should be anticipating that, and we should be weaving that into our strategy, and we should be acting accordingly. And that is what strategy is all about. That's why we're having this webinar here today. So it doesn't wait for milestones, it anticipates them. The need for optimal business decisions has never ended, and it's never been more important. We want to optimize our business decisions all of the time, not just in emergencies. If you look at the sum total of the bad business decisions that led to our business conditions in 2019, which, oh, by the way, you may look back on that and say, oh, it was so wonderful. Let me tell you, I've seen your financials. It was not. It was horrible. And we didn't know how bad off we were until the pandemic took it all away and allowed us to rebuild so that we can see what a clean slate would actually bring us without the baggage and overhead of all the years and years of past decisions that were not optimized. They were not strategic. They were just reactionary and maybe focused a little bit too much on the top line. So I was asked by somebody in the AV industry who wasn't really, they're in the systems integration world, and they weren't really adversely affected by the pandemic other than the inconvenience of it. Anybody who's in integration knows that they've been thriving. Corporations scrambled to get remodeling projects done that had been, postponed or waiting because they had empty buildings and they could do those things. The changing needs of their workforce, people working from home, they needed new communications infrastructure. AV for integration has been booming, and they knew that we were hurt and they knew that we were adversely affected in the live events world, but they asked a really good question. Why did live die when we are doing so well? And I thought about this, and I just wanted to share a bit of my thoughts on this because there's some real important lessons in here. There have been 3 paths for live event companies during the pandemic. In March of 2020, when I started doing the webinars, it was you can shutter your company, close it down, put your head in the sand, if you will, and wait for it all to blow over and then reemerge. You could survive, which is pull back and then start grabbing new business as you can, or you could pivot. And pivot was to find a strategic opportunity where your skills would match up with a clientele. And as it turned out, an emerging clientele. And I will tell you, honestly, all three of those were good choices. Whether you chose to shutter your business, slide into survival mode, or pivot, I'm not judging that. They all had their benefits, their risks, and their rewards. Shutter and survive really depended on old customers coming back, and pivoting embraced a new buyer. So when we think about it, why did Live die? Well, who's better off in the long run on shutter, survive, and pivot? Well, is there a guarantee? The longer the pandemic goes on, the less of a guarantee that your old customers are going to come back, because those people may not be there. Those businesses may not operate the same way because they've also had to cope with the pandemic. In other words, it was not a great bet, but some portion of your old customers are obviously going to come back and do things like they did before. Matter of fact, they're going to send you that quote from 2018 and ask you to meet those prices. So we know they're coming back, and we know exactly how they're going to come back at you. So Live didn't really die, right? I mean, sure, business went to zero for a short time. It had to pivot quickly. It didn't die. It pivoted quickly because the pre-pandemic business model is what died. Live events didn't die. Our business models did. Tragedy is the excess of a virtue. If you studied Shakespeare in high school or college, you know that the definition of a Shakespearean tragedy is a hero who has a virtue that is taken to the extreme that leads to their downfall. And we had a virtue in our industry, which led to our downfall. We had a too much of a good thing, and you can probably guess what it is. Let's think about this. At a time when labor was really inexpensive, pre-pandemic, it was easy to outsource. We hired full-time workers at low hourly rates rather than take advantage of the labor market. And then now, when our labor is expensive and hard to find, AV companies should be outsourcing, but they don't know how because they didn't do it before. We have a habit of doing things exactly the opposite. And the thing that we did that was opposite was we worshiped revenue. And we have been worshiping revenue for years instead of worshiping profit. And the more we worship revenue, the smaller our profits have gone. I've been tracking P&Ls from live event companies for, since the early 90s, but very, very closely the past 15 years. And all I've seen is revenue increase while profits shrink, because we are not a scalable industry in our old business model. Scalability in a volatile industry is being able to operate profitably as revenue rises or as it falls. And the most valuable word in a scalable business is no, and we have a problem saying no to revenue. What we need to be better at is saying yes to profit and no to no profit. So the big takeaway, all of this, and I'll get onto the topic for the webinar, is stop comparing your current business to 2019. There, I said it. I know you're still going to call me, and we're going to have a meeting. We're going to have a conversation here next month, and you're going to say, hey, Tom, we're doing about 50% of revenue. And I'm going to say, oh, you mean 2019 revenue? And you're going to go, yes. And I'm going to say, why is that important? Because it has nothing to do with anything. 2019 revenue has nothing to do with 2021 or 2022 revenue, because we are looking at two different business models. And even though you're doing something similar, you should be running a business that is more scalable now, or we've wasted an entirely good crisis and not learned anything. Crises are great because they tell us where our business models are vulnerable, and business models are always vulnerable. Okay. The question strategy always asks is what will prevent us from succeeding? You know, the pandemic was something so improbable to most people that it didn't merit consideration. It was very easy to deny that possibility because it would cause us to make really difficult choices that we were just uncomfortable to make. It was also very specific. But what would happen if you could not operate your business for 90 days and you have no idea when that will occur? If you're running an organization that has to be fiscally responsible, that's a pretty fair question to ask management. How are you going to run this business for 90 days if you have no idea when that 90 days is going to start? It could be at any moment. These kinds of vulnerabilities are something that need to be considered, but they don't need to be consuming, because if you're running a scalable business model, you know how to scale your business down for 90 days and how to make those adjustments and then scale it back up afterwards, which is actually the purpose of the question. So when we forgot to ask ourselves that question and we allowed ourselves to focus on revenue, what we did to make money was to focus on job cost. And by reducing job costs, I can increase my gross profit and make more money off of that revenue, except that when you focus on job cost, you over amplify cost recognition, you end up over hiring staff and people, you over purchase equipment, basically increase your overhead, and you force yourself to accept thinner and thinner margins because you need that revenue machine with this incremental gross profit to keep the whole thing going, because you can't turn down business. So you create this Ouroboros effect where you're feeding on yourself, and the only way to keep going is to take in revenue, even when it might be empty revenue, because you need the cash to keep the engine burning so that you can get to the next month, so that maybe you'll come out ahead. It's exhausting, and I know you've all lived it, and I'm trying to do my best to get you to stop living that way and live a little bit differently. So let me ask you a different strategic question. What if the post-pandemic world will be bad for your business? Think about that. What are there circumstances that post-pandemic could adversely affect you? Have you thought about what those things are? Because this is something that we can deal with. This is something that we can make intentional choices to help our business move forward. Because my point is, strategy always matters, right? Even when you're experiencing success, and many of you are right now, many of my clients are doing very, very well right now. Even when you're experiencing success, you should always be rethinking your strategy. You may not always have to implement a rethink, but you need to always be rethinking it. Even when you are struggling, you should always be rethinking your strategy, because maybe you're struggling the wrong way. You know, there's a lesson that you teach, you know, when I was a Boy Scout and a lifeguard and teaching swimming, and, you know, swimming in you know, if you're caught in a river, so if you fall out of your canoe, you know, how do you rescue yourself? Which direction do you go? And, you know, the lesson is, well, you don't try and swim upstream because you can't get there, right? You may not even be able to swim back to the boat. You swim straight at shore, knowing that the current is going to drag you way downstream, but you always have to be going straight at a 90-degree angle towards the shore in order to get to the shore as quickly as possible. So your trajectory is downstream. Your goal is straight ahead across the shore. Even when you're struggling, you should always be rethinking your strategy. What if there's an obstacle this way? Do I change direction? Do I go back? Do I just pause and wait and let it pull me downstream and move forward to the side? And these are the things that we talked about in lifeguarding class, about how do you think if you can rescue yourself, you can help somebody else rescue themselves. So strategy always matters. Now, let's get into intentional strategy. What is strategy? Everybody say it with me. Strategy is engineering what you want to happen based on what you think will happen. couple of important keys here. First of all, you have to think about what's going to happen. Okay. And then you have to make steps. You have to engineer steps that will get you to what you want to happen. You need a goal, right? So if you have a goal and you think these things are going to happen, you think these influencers are going to matter, there's this current, okay, there's this river, okay, your strategy is engineering what you want to happen is I want to get to shore and not drown. Based on what you think will happen is that the river is going to continue to pull me downstream. Therefore, I have to do this in spite of all the changes I might have. So strategy is engineering what you want to happen based on what you think will happen. The right strategy is why the tactics you choose will succeed. You pick a good strategy, the tactics are going to help you. The right tactics are going to make your strategy look smarter, and it's going to help you realize your strategy faster, right? Strategy is always going to be fluid, okay? It is not fixed because what we think will happen evolves as soon as we put it into play. So as soon as you initiate a strategy, your goal may not change, but what you have to do to get to your goal may start to change immediately. So strategy is always important. You're always thinking 2, 3, or 5 steps ahead, as far ahead as you can. And it all starts with identifying an actual need. I am sure business school, back when I was in business school, the case study that was very popular at the time, God help us, was Enron, which was before we knew that they were a very evil company doing very, very bad things, and manipulating values and, well, turning people's lights off. But at the time, on paper, they looked like a really brilliant company that was increasing its value dramatically and making shareholders rich. I bet business schools today are talking about Amazon, which barely existed when I was, it was probably 5 or 6 years old when I was in college, grad school. But Amazon's very important, and it's the best example of strategy, of intentional strategy that I have. And we all understand it because we've all seen it. We've watched this. Many of you have grown up with this. Jeff Bezos, love him or hate him. Amazon, love it or hate it. You have to admire their application of his application of strategy. If strategy is engineering what you want to happen based on what you think will happen, what he thought would happen is that people would buy online if there was a way to do it. And in 1994, there really wasn't a good way to buy online. Matter of fact, it was the internet was kind of the Wild West. It was pretty shoddy. But he knew that at some point in time, this was going to become very, very valuable. And he wanted, what did he want to happen? He wanted them to buy from his platform. So obviously, he's got to develop a platform to meet this, to develop this strategy. And he's got to test some product lines. And this is what I found, one of the things I found very interesting in studying this is that he started off with a list of 20 products he thought could be marketed on and sold online effectively. And he narrowed that list down to what he thought were the 5 most promising products, which included compact discs, computer hardware, computer software, videos, and books. And this is 1994. In 1995, he sold his first book online. And why did he choose books? Well, for a lot of reasons. One, books don't get returned, right? They ship at Book Crate, at least they did in the 1990s. My wife managed bookstores back then. They were easy to store and warehouse. They're easy to package. They're easy to SKU. There's a lot of things about books that made them a great first product. And also there were some vulnerabilities in the book selling retail market at that time. So once he's chosen books and he's testing out his platform and he's making some sales, Amazon started looking at accelerators. How can we make our share of the book market grow more quickly? Mind you, this is a company that didn't make any money its first 10 years in business. So they started doing printing and then they publishing, and then they invented the Kindle so they could do digital books and warehousing and logistics. And then they started looking at applying the back end behind all of this to other business problems like Amazon servers. If you go download a lead magnet from my website, it's coming off an Amazon server, right? So they're reselling a lot of their infrastructure and using the things they're learning and applying them to other businesses. In fact, they've pretty much supplanted the US Postal Service and FedEx as top delivery providers. And yeah, they don't just sell books anymore, do they? They sell everything because it's the effective application of a strategy. Now, yeah, they've made some horrible mistakes and they've done some things, that they probably wish they didn't do, like most companies. But the fact of the matter is, they've been more successful than they have failed, and they've been extremely consistent in all of this. So engineering what you want to happen based on what you think will happen is very important. You've got that clear goal. You have these things that are going to pull you off track from time to time, but you're going to make adjustments. And as owners and managers of businesses, this is what you have to do. You keep your eye on the goal. You don't let the trigger, magnet, or influencer pull you too far off course. You pull yourself back on course. These are the shiny objects we talk about. This is the $1 million event that you want to have because it's a $1 million event and you've never done a $1 million event, even though you're going to probably lose money on it. These are the things that we shouldn't be doing, that management needs to keep us on course and have us doing the right thing, because progress is never in a straight line. So bookstore owners from the 90s, and like I said, my wife managed bookstores back then, they now understand this statement. As a matter of fact, all retailers now understand this statement, that the revelation that something has always worked should terrify you. Entire shopping malls are being shuttered because the retail model that fit inside of those malls is no longer viable. And the pandemic has amplified all of this, because who goes shopping anymore, right? We go online and we buy it, and we get it delivered to our home. Surprisingly fast, much more easily. Maybe it costs a few dollars more, but who cares? Look at the benefit. So it doesn't replace everything, and there's still a tactile experience in shopping. And I know people who are avid shoppers, they just love to shop. I don't happen to be one of them, so I'm not hurt by this. But the fact is, retailers have been in trouble because they failed to see what Amazon was going to be able to do. And they did not rethink their strategy if the unthinkable actually happened. Now, quick exercise for you. Just jot a few thoughts down here. When you think about, the goals for your business and the trajectory that you've been on, and going forward, what are the factors that are outside of your control that just might pull you off course? And write a few of those things down. Write a few of the things down that you think that could adversely affect you if you let go of the steering wheel. And think of them as threats. What are the threats that you see to your business? And it's interesting because when we do this exercise with my clients, very often they'll write down some threats that sound horrific. I go, why are you dismissing that? Why are some of these threats so easy to dismiss? Well, because we think the odds of them not happening are pretty low, or we think that because we have no control over it, there's nothing we can do to prepare and we're just going to have to cope. Right? And that is not thinking strategically. Thinking strategically is understanding, if I know how to plan and provide for this eventuality or this potentiality, what can I learn from that I might be able to apply to my business anyway? Right? So look at your list. I bet a lot of you wrote down labor, staffing, people. The number one issue in our industry right now, of course, is supply chain. And remember, we are part of a supply chain. We are not just the consumers of a supply chain. We are in a supply chain. People, products, value are the three elements of the supply chain that are most affected for you right now. And I want to talk about that. When the traditional supply chain is constrained, then value is created somewhere differently. It's created somewhere else. Value creation changes whenever supply chain is constrained. So if it's difficult to ship something in a timely manner, if it's difficult to get product out of China to sell in North America, Okay, that's a constraint. How do you create value? Well, maybe you create value by getting product out of South America. Okay. There are 3 areas of strategic leverage when supply chains are constrained. And let's talk about each one of these. People, because it is like the most apparent for all of us right now. Very low unemployment, very few people in the labor market who want to be hired. Our freelance labor pool is probably diminished by 50% or more. It's hard to even find freelancers who will come and do your events. Touring people are expecting 20-man crews to set up at 6 a.m. at the arena, and they're finding 4 people. There's some tough stuff going on out there. The workforce planning that you need for today requires much better forecasting than you've ever done, which is difficult, higher wages than you've ever been comfortable paying, more practical training of that workforce because they're not going to come to you skilled, and then a lot more flexibility in scheduling. And this applies to your full-time, your part-time on demand, and your freelance crews or staffing company crews. You can't ask for what you can ask for what you want. You're going to get what is available, and that's part of what supply chain means. So right now, the demand coming from you is greater than the supply chain can provide, but you are the one that's going to have to accommodate. You are the one that's going to have to do something differently. So 1, yeah, you're going to have to pay more. 2, you're going to have to reduce the risk of the supply chain to engage with you. You're going to have to teach them how to do the things that are going to be helpful for you because they may not come with that skill set. And you may have to do things like, well, have this camera operator for 2 days, but have another person for 2 days on the same camera. You're going to have to do some things that you wouldn't have thought of or even wanted to do before. You need to redesign how your on-demand workforce works within this new supply chain because workers are making better decisions for themselves. And I am a worker advocate. I ran a staffing company. I've worked with, booking freelancers. And I've worked with a number of union organizations, and I really understand what they've been saying about workers making decisions for themselves. So there's a lot of things that we can learn from this during this period, however long or brief it may be, where our demand exceeds the available supply of people. We have similar problems on the product side, but as many of you are rental-based companies, you've got a warehouse full of equipment. You don't see it as much as we do in like the integration world, where manufacturers simply don't have product to ship, and the built environment is going to struggle getting new product to put in the permanent installations. I mean, if you need to buy a QSC amp anytime in the next 2 years, you just may be out of luck. So rental kit is just a tactic. The fact that you own equipment is just a tactic that serves only a portion of your fulfillment needs. Okay. Your product in a constrained market is not the solution. It is a solution. So your product is the service to provide the next necessary solution. So shifting the idea of what your product is from the things that you can deliver physically from your own warehouse that have your sticker on them to making sure that the right things show up, it's still worth a lot of money. In fact, it might be worth more money because procurement is so difficult right now. So shifting to services in order to deliver product is a very healthy strategic consideration in a constrained marketplace. But remember, okay, your supply chain may be constrained. Okay. What about your customer supply chain? Well, guess what? It is also constrained, right? You've just never been in a position where you didn't have unlimited resources in which to buy from. And all of a sudden you do have limited resources. Your customers have been used to having unlimited resources to buy from. Now they have limited resources to buy from. So it's a very different relationship that we have in all of this, which is why value is very, very important to us. So your ability to source a product or a solution is more valuable than being the source of that solution. And we no longer can pride ourselves in saying, oh, we have the best people. They're sitting right here waiting for me to schedule them onto something. Okay, that is not where value is created. Matter of fact, that's where value has traditionally vaporized, because we have to pay for that person to sit there as well as for that person to work. And our customers knew that. So our customers were in a position to leverage their buying power with our overabundance of supply. And they got better pricing, which is why our prices have been falling so much for the past 2 decades. What we can focus on now in a constrained supply demand curve, if we think about this strategically, is customer side value. What is it? It was focus on the what, not the how. What is it you're going to do for companies, for customers, that is valuable to them that they're going to pay you money for? Not how it is, are you going to do it? So no more value add, no matter, oh no, we'll throw this in, or yes, this includes. You need to unbundle all those value creation to capture those actual costs. You need to add margin to that in proportion to the customer side value. And then you need to go back and present it to that customer. And what is this going to look like that's different from your 2019 self? Your 2019 self was all of the people on your staff were value add. You charged market rate for them, even though they were costing you more than market rate because you're paying for their downtime and their uptime, right? And you made money off of your rental equipment, okay? That is flipped now, okay? So if you unbundle value creation, the ability to design and plan an event is more valuable than sourcing the parts and pieces, or being the source of the parts and pieces, because you can also sell being the source, to be the company that sources those outcomes. So you don't have to be the company that has the people on staff or even the equipment in your warehouse, but you might. It doesn't change the value of being able to get those things done for that customer. And it's a little bit different mindset. It's a different way of pricing, but the fact is there is more money to be made right now because demand is exceeding supply. When you are supply, there is more demand than there is supply. If they can't buy from you, they're going to have trouble buying from someone else, which is why a lot of the conversations that when I'm talking to sales teams, the first conversation they're having with the customer is asking, are you guys even going to be available to do this? And that's their biggest criteria, not how cheap can you do this for. So that's a very different situation for us that we have to learn to take advantage of. So another exercise for you to do, and you can work on this afterwards as well. Have a conversation. What has changed in your customer's language about their needs? Think about this. What are they asking differently? And this started, way back in the early pandemic. They were asking for help doing Zoom. They were asking for help to use office tools that were already on their computers, which is not something that you ever did for people before. That wasn't your job, or it's something you just did for free when we teach our client how to use their PowerPoint on their laptop before their presentation to activate this external monitor, right? So all of a sudden, the customer's language and needs have changed. What have you offered in response? So think about this, write some things down, and you should end up with, cause and effects couplets. The customer started saying this, so we started doing this, and see how many of these cause and effect couplets you can find. So what's changed in their customer language and needs, and what have you offered in response? Who has the power in your couplets? When you look at the couplet, customer need, your response, who has the power? If it's you, you made the right response. You created the studio environment, you introduced pre-production, you taught them how to, you provided capture for them or whatever they need in order to make their virtual communications more effective. Okay, if you have the power in the couplets, you made a strong strategic choice and followed through. In the current demand cycle, all of these couplets should leave you with more power. And if they don't, if you had to succumb, if you were giving up ground in your couplets, then you've misread the opportunity. You've lost track of your goal. You've let an influencer push you off course. And it's probably something that we need to have an honest conversation about. So when is this post-pandemic thing really going to happen? Okay, what is it? What is it? I will tell you that what I'm telling my clients is that it's never really going to go away. We're hearing about this in some of the analysis and from the medical community, some portion of this. There's going to be lingering caution for a long time. We don't know how long. It may be so long that we won't even recognize it as the cautious steps that we're taking. So some of this is not going to go away. So hoping that things are going to snap back to the way they were is probably unrealistic. The supply chain will rebalance. The inflation in some areas that we're seeing is already turning around. I just paid $2.48 for gasoline. That was, $4.50 3 weeks ago. There are things that are happening in the supply chain that are going to make things better. Rebalancing the supply chain means that people are going to have to be accommodated first. We've got to make some correction in the marketplace for what talent is worth and what people are worth and what freelancers are worth and temp workers are worth. When corporations could hire a temp worker for less money than they had to pay a full-time employee to do the same work, there's something really out of whack in the labor market. There was an oversupply of labor. So the adjustments in the supply chain there, I think, are going to be better. Now, it does mean that you're going to have to pay your employees more, but once you do that, you're able to pay more to the labor market, to the outsource market, which means that you're going to have better access to better talent, which means that you can provide more value and services to your customers, which is what they're paying you to do. There's going to be a new demand curve, especially in the built environment, audience everywhere. And there's the lines between what's a permanent installation and a temporary live event. Those lines have already gotten extremely blurry. So we're going to see a lot of crossover demand between those two worlds. And what will happen? Well, it's already happening now. So if all of these things are starting to happen, we're starting to see what post-pandemic is actually going to look like, and how long can we preserve a balance of power between our supply and our customers' demand that will allow us to keep our profits up. That's on us. I will tell you, the model that we walked away from in 2020, the 2019 model, that's the same model that we were doing 20 years before, right? That model amplified led to shrinking margins over 20 years. We used to make it, in 1990, expecting to make 20 or 24% net profit, people, was normal. That's why we started rental businesses, because they were extremely profitable. Now I'm looking at companies that are thrilled to make 4% net profit. There's something terribly wrong with that in 2019 when that's considered success and when doing the same business model. So something happened in the supply chain that we didn't react to. We missed a strategic opportunity. Man, that's an awful lot of lecturing here for the end of the year. I should be talking about the holidays, but I've got news for you. I know why you're going to succeed. Okay. I mean, you're here, you're listening to me. We're having these conversations. This is what we want. You're going to succeed because you're going to take some next steps. Okay. Focus on creating value. Okay. Value, which means stop overselling because that reduces value. Stop underpricing because that undervalues. Right? You are worth more than you think. You're just afraid to ask for it. What's the classic salesman statement? The client won't pay for that. They will if we have a better salesman. So right now we're in a situation where the client will pay for that. We're just not always asking. So create value. Build a better on-demand workforce. It is not going to build itself. isn't magically going to appear. People aren't magically going to come back to the marketplace. You are going to have to do something. You're going to have to go to your workforce and you're going to have to offer them more money, better hours, better working conditions, whatever it takes, because you need an on-demand workforce in order to sell the value, which is being able to source a better on-demand workforce, right? And you've got to dramatically reduce your overhead, because every time you add overhead, it forces you to sell revenue for revenue's sake so that you can get past your break-even point and maybe not lose money, right? That's a bad formula. Reduce your overhead so that you could ride the ups and downs of an inherently volatile business and industry and figure out how to be profitable all of the time, not just under certain circumstances and conditions. Now, what's going to hold you back from this success? Well, it's everything I've been talking about. It's the mindset. Remember, the first sale is always to yourself. You have to believe that what you're doing is the right thing and that is in the best interest of your customer for you to do this. And it is. It is in your customer's best interest for you to have a better labor source to source from, which means paying that labor force more, which means charging your customer more. And if they don't understand that, I suggest that they are probably not a good customer. You should find other customers, because remember, demand exceeds supply. And what do you do when demand exceeds supply? You get rid of crummy customers. Processes have to change. One of the processes that needs to change is, how do we evaluate whether a customer is good or not? Okay. And then pricing needs to change. Okay. You've got to change how you price things, because margin should track with value. The more valuable something is, the more margin there should be there. So your pricing and how you present pricing probably needs to evolve. If you're selling projects, by the way, the value is the project. It's not the sum of the parts. Some of the parts is how you got to the project value. Okay, that's the customer doesn't buy the sum of the parts. You don't buy a car one piece at a time. You buy a finished working car, right? Your projects are very much the same way. So some conclusions, and it's time for some questions. And I see I've got a couple up here, several up here already. I'll scroll through. Look, pre-pandemic business models were really, really flawed in the live events industry. And I'm sorry. And I hate to say I told you so, but it's the stuff I've been telling you for the past 15 years. But the pandemic amplified it for us. And so now we have a chance to fix it. Customer needs are changing. Demand is up. They need us to be better at supplying their demand. And your business has more buyers and resources. So that means you've got to behave differently. You have different influencers on your trajectory now, some of which you've never seen in your business careers. So intentional strategy is accepting everything I just said while maintaining your goal. Because nowhere in this webinar have I asked you to change your goal. There's nothing wrong with your goal. You just need to work harder to get to it. Okay, goals are great. If you're having trouble with goals, I can help you with that too, because sometimes they're just standing right in front of you, and we can start moving in that direction. So, as always, guys, this is a great deal of fun. I love presenting this stuff to you. If you're the business owner, you should be thinking about your next step. All right, we're coming out of a difficult period. Many of you, your businesses are doing really well, or your trajectory is somehow clear. It's time to breathe, figure out what your next step is. Do we work on making this business better? Is it time to exercise your exit strategy, or figure out what your exit strategy is? You just want to make business fun again because you got another 20 years in front of you. You know, what's important to you? Now's the time to be talking about it, because we're going to have an exciting several years in front of us, while demand continues to exceed our supply chain, which is actually going to be good for you. So breathe, post some questions. Let me get rid of this screen share and let's talk about some things. All right. Let me put some Q&A over here in front of me and make one more slide change here. All right. Okay. Longtime hotel client is asking that we communicate directly, even bill directly their client because they have very limited experienced sales staff. Right. Venues are having trouble keeping sales staff and planners. That's understandable. We had to offer them their discount as credit for jobs because they did not know how to ask for it. All right. This is a comment. This is not a question, but this is a great comment because what this person is saying is he's listening to his customer, in this case, the venue, the hotel, and he's understanding what their needs are. Their needs are right now is they don't have the sales force to convert the add-on sale of the audio visual services. We're having to do that for them, which I would point out has a lot of value, which greatly changes the relationship between you as suppliers and the hotels and some of the ridiculous discount rebate commission structures that have been out there. We can give some money back to the hotels, help them make some money by demonstrating that the value that we actually create. And this is fantastic. If there's not 10 other companies beating down their door to give them an extra 5% of commission, they're going to listen to you a lot better. And that is our job. Our job is to advise our people, our customers, and give them our best advice, our best input. And that's where we create value. So good for you for doing that. Where should I look for good guidance and best practices on outsourcing labor, taking advantage of the labor market? Well, I mean, I think, first of all, you need to speak to each other because if you're living inside a bubble, then you're not talking to the other people who are on this call here today. The people that you should be meeting at networking events or at Infocom or LDI or wherever it is you go to talk to people are in industry, because we're all doing something right. And if we take everything that we're all doing right and put it together, we're going to do a ton of things right. Best practices. Yeah, I'm a great source for that. I don't think there's really anybody in the industry who has more experience in dealing with the outsourced labor market than I do. And I can certainly help you apply that, but that's not why the question was being asked. I think the question is being asked because you need to talk to each other. There's not a book. There's not a specific webinar. Every labor supplier is going to be somewhat self-serving in their treatment of this issue. There's a lot of people that you need to talk to, and I think they're on this call. Next question. Since so many folks have been displaced, especially on the client end user side, yes. What is your best recommendation to identify decision makers? LinkedIn is great, but looking for other strategies to consider. All right. So we've always told salespeople, we want you to go out there and find the decision maker. We want to talk to the economic buyer. But getting to an economic buyer is a process. There's not always that shortcut. And because there's been such changes in the buy side for events, the entire department that used to do events is gone. And now somebody in, marketing communications is now in charge of events. And they don't have the infrastructure and process set up to be effective buyers. And oh, by the way, they are also not the ultimate decision maker. So knowing all of this, what I recommend is that you actually have a thoughtful strategic process for onboarding prospects through your system, because the buyer, the economic buyer, will reveal themselves in that process. So if you can find the interested party or the person who's the influencer, recommender, or even gatekeeper, and engage them in a process about how you can create value for them and filter them, then you're going to get to that person, the economic buyer, eventually. But it shouldn't always be the goal. The goal is ultimately to have the hearts and minds of that customer, whether you get to shake the hand of the person who made the final decision or not. As long as all the people that you are dealing with are influencing them in the right way, we're all going to win, right? Which is a that kind of lays into the next question I'm seeing here. So how do you know what projects to say no to, right? That's kind of the follow-on question, getting to the economic buyer. How do you say no? So I'm using 3 filters, and in the right order. And the order of this is very, very important to know what projects to say no to, because if you're not turning down projects, there's something wrong in what you're doing. There's enough work out there that you should be turning stuff down. It's profile, focus, and then price. Price is the last filter. We'll talk about that last. The first thing is profile, and it's the buyer profile. Is this the right buyer I want? And is this somebody I want to do business with? And this is very, very subjective. I sometimes say this is, do I want to sit down and have a beer with this person? Life's too short to work with people you don't like. And when demand exceeds supply, you can be way more selective about who you do business with. So first, let's make sure that we've got the right profile. Is somebody approaching you honestly? Are they asking honest questions? Are they being vulnerable about their budget? Are they going to allow you to do your best work? All of this can be sussed out. And in the first few minutes of a conversation, you can get a read on whether or not this person wants to be a good partner with you, or anyone for that matter. And if they don't pass the profile test, it's okay to be done and thank them and say, why don't I just put you on the mailing list and just go back to work? If they pass the profile test, then we need to look at focus. And focus is, they may want to buy from someone. They may even want to buy from you. But if they don't want to buy what it is that you do, there's not a real good reason to do business together. In other words, I say, if they're not buying what you are selling, if what you are selling is full service production, content creation, and event management and staging, and they just want to buy staging, well, you don't have a focus fit. So this may be the nicest person in the world and a great dinner companion, but they're not buying what you're selling. Your capacity should be reserved for the buyers that are focused on what it is that you do and what you provide to your customers. So profile first, focus second. If they pass those two tests, then we have the price test, which we could also say is a value test, because they have to let you make money. So profile means they have to be willing to let you make money, and that usually comes out pretty early in the conversation. But as we get into the proposal, the budgeting and then proposal process, because you know me, budget comes first and then we do proposal, is, are they going to allow you to make money? Are they price shopping? And if it hasn't been revealed by this, then your price and your proposal and where you put margin is going to dictate whether or not you can do business together. And that is indeed the final filter. The best closer that I tell salespeople is that before you write a proposal, if you can say to the customer, say, if we meet all of these criteria and mark off all the tick points about the things that are important to everyone, and we can do this within your budget and deliver you a design and an implementation that fits your budget, or can we do business together? Is this something that's going to work? And if they say is absolutely, well, sure, then of course I'm going to write you a budget, because you have an agreement in principle. And I would shake hands at that moment, in person or virtually, saying, can we shake hands on that? Because before I commit my team to the expense of putting together a proposal, I want to make sure we are on the same page. And now your proposal is not really a proposal, it's an agreement on things that you've already agreed upon. Now, most of our clients now, to the earlier question, are not the people who are going to make the decision. They have to take your pretty proposal and their strong recommendation, and they've got to go get somebody else to approve it that you may not have access to, because that person is probably even higher up the food chain than they were before the pandemic, perhaps, C-suite. So you may have to write a better proposal, but if you write a proposal with a very strong understanding between you and the tactical buyer in this conversation, then you have a much better chance for success. And great. So unfortunately, we're out of time, and we made it without a power outage. So yay for technology. I just want to say thank you, everybody. Remember, your job is to build a scalable business. You need to anticipate your customers' needs, and you need to respond, not just react, but respond to the supply and demand pressures that you're seeing, because they do affect the trajectory of your business. Don't lose sight of them. This is what being strategic is all about. Engineer what you want to happen based on what you think will happen, and let's have some fun doing it. So thank you, everybody. Have a happy holiday. I will see you in 2022.